Hello, everybody. Operating one business is tough, but what sparks the desire to not only open a brewery, but also a winery or more? We will dive into why our panelists chose this model, strategies for success, lessons they have learned over time, and items for you to consider if looking into a similar concept. But first, let's meet our guest. And Clay, because you are to the right of me, you get to go first.
All right.
How's everything down in Florida today?
Oh, it's good. It's good. It's cold down here today. We're like in the 50s, mid 50s. So I got my sweater, one of the 3 sweaters I own.
I love it. So tell us a little bit more about what you do in the world of, well, you work in a lot of different spaces, Clay. So why don't you give that introduction?
Yeah, thank you. So we're a 40-acre farm. Been a farm here about 40 years. About 20 years ago, started making wine with blueberries that we were growing. And since then, we've gotten into making cider and beer. We have a tasting room and kind of a farm experience that's open 7 days a week. We also distribute the wine and cider throughout the state of Florida.
Awesome. Well, I'm excited to learn from you today. Thanks again, Clay.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Barbara, you're up. How are you today?
I'm doing well, thank you. How about yourselves?
I can't complain. And, you're not too far from me. We're both in the state of Virginia, and I feel like I'm going to have to visit soon now.
You are going to have to come say hello. Yes.
So I look forward to that face-to-face encounter. But, for everyone who hasn't met you before, what do you do in the world of beer and wine, Barbara?
So we started planting grapes in 2015 with the idea that we were just going to open, well, actually, we were just going to grow grapes and sell them. Quickly realized that is not sustainable. So we thought, well, we'll just do a small little tasting room. And then probably about 3 or 4 years ago, our third son started being a cider maker at one of the local cideries. And we got to thinking that of all the breweries and wineries that we went to, not any of them had any other offerings aside from what they were known for. So we thought, well, we'll go ahead and do cider. It is a wine product. It's not that far out. But again, that doesn't appeal to everyone. So my son's mentor was a brewer, and he said he would teach my son how to brew beer. So we kind of came around. It's the same equipment for the most part. So we came around and said, we'll do all 3, and we'll actually add hard seltzer to the mix as well. So yeah, so that's kind of where we are right now. And since then, I don't know if anyone else has noticed, but I think there's a lot more of either the wines offering a beer or a brewery offering a wine. But not any of them are making all 3 products under a lot of them are kind of pulling from everybody else. So we thought we'd give it a try, see it happen.
Awesome. I'm excited to learn how it's going. So you opened in October of 2022, correct?
Yeah, we've only been open 6 weeks. We're only open for weekends. We had a bit of trouble. We have a Deutsch system, which is wonderful, but we've had it for 3 years. We started this project in 2020. Great time to do. Kind of everything went on hold. So trying to get back into the Deutsch pipeline to have it all fitted out, up and running. It took a little bit longer than we anticipated. So we ended up getting some licenses to allow us to serve beer from other vendors from our immediate area. And it's been very well received. So, and the people around us have been really welcoming, and the other vendors have been really nice about letting us use their guest taps. So
awesome. At this point, are you serving your own beer yet?
He just put his own brew into kegs. It is carbonating as we speak. So as of Friday this week, we will be serving our own beer as well as our cider. So
huge congratulations on that.
Yeah, it was a long time coming.
You got this. Now, Tamara, you're up. Tell everybody else a little bit about what you do in the world of beverage.
So I'm located in Atlanta area. We're just outside Atlanta. We actually started as a meadery 7 years ago, and everybody, of course, knows what mead is. I'm sure you don't. It happens all the time. So it's a wine made with honey instead of grapes. So we opened 7 years ago in a very small space, about 1,500 square feet. We moved to our new location, which is about 5,000 square feet. And our grand opening here was during the pandemic. So I understand, Barbara, exactly what you're going through. We were so excited, and our grand opening was April 1st, I think. So, which is 2 weeks after the start of all the lockdowns. So we had our grand opening this year. We decided, screw it, we're just going to do it anyways. But anyway, so we when we didn't have space at our old location to add beer to it, we were using kegerators for our tap system. And yeah, we made it work, you know. So we had about 18 taps with the kegerators, And our new location here, we have 48 taps.
48 taps. Wow.
Yeah, yeah. They're not always full.
How many of those taps, Tamara, are mead?
Anywhere between, there are about 20 of them that are mead. We do sours and sessions. Our signature meads, we have 6 signature meads that are out in distribution always. And those are 11%. So those are always on tap. They're always in distribution. We have a couple seasonals that we keep. And then the rest of them are sessions and ciders. We like to say that our staff is, everybody that works for us is a mead maker. So if you have an idea, give us the ingredients that you want to get, and we'll throw it on a tap and see what the audience thinks. In fact, one of our ciders that one of our production guys made a month ago was gone in a weekend. So I said, all right, well, now you're making 20 gallons. So get on it. And so then we added the brewery 2 years ago. That has been a completely different adventure because I'm sure rules are pretty similar to most places, but they have to have a separation of where the brewery is and the brewery equipment compared to where all the winery equipment is, because it's managed by 2 different departments in the government. So they have to be separate for whatever reason. So we have our brewery area that's separate. And we have some alternating premises that we use for the meadery as well. But the brewery is just in-house. We distribute a little bit of the beer, but not too much. But it's mostly meant for in-house. So that way, when people come in, they can try the meads, they can try the ciders, they can try the beer. So there's a little bit for everybody. We always say with 48 taps, there's really no reason for you to not have something you like.
No, I love that. And you touched on so many aspects we're going to dive deeper into.
Oh, sorry.
No, it's fantastic. It's a big teaser there. I mean, you talked about the education, especially, with regard to mead, teaching people what it is in many fronts because they might not be aware. You talked about how it's great to diversify your offerings, the challenges you face in production. I mean, I feel like I could just ask you a question for an hour now, but I want to involve Clay and Barbara in this as well. So, Barbara, I want to come back to you because you, like we mentioned, just opened. You initially thought you'd just grow grapes, then maybe you just, sell wine. And now you do a whole lot more. It's one thing to consider doing all of these different products, but what made you actually go through with adding all the different product lines for your launch, which you launched, like I said, in October of this year?
Because we're idiots. No.
I feel that.
It feels the same way, I am sure. We just thought where we were located in the county, we're in a very rural county. We are 45 minutes from Richmond, or 45 minutes from Charlottesville. Richmond has a huge craft scene, but a lot of people don't live in the immediate area. They're kind of out in the suburbs, just the way it works. Charlottesville is known for, obviously, its wine, world-class place to be. So we're kind of in the middle of both of those. And in our county that we're in, there's not a lot of development yet on the eastern side of that county. So when we bought the land, we just kind of thought we did a traffic study because we needed to get a driveway. And we found that over 3,000 people pass in front of us at any one time. Well, not at any one time, throughout the course of the day, because that would be chaos. And it's a bedroom community for both Charlottesville and Richmond. So the other big part of our model is to stay open late. Most wineries in the area close by 6 on the weekends. We're open till 8 Friday and Saturday, and 7 until Sunday. So we are definitely pulling in people that are just not ready to end their day, or some of them just starting their day, as far as going out and having fun with friends. And again, the really big thing is so many people are going out in groups, and not everyone wants to drink wine. Not everyone wants to drink mead. Not everyone wants to drink cider. Not everyone wants to drink beer. So to have an offering of all three, we kind of felt we'd get people in and keep them there longer, to just hit on everything. We're not as big as you are, Cameron. We'll only, the max we'll ever have, I believe, is 14 different things on our long lines. The most wine we'll ever have in offering is probably just 8 different types. So we're going to keep things pretty tight. and hopefully move product quickly. And we'll get a better idea of what people are really interested in and what they like, and how their tastes evolve. So that's kind of how we did it.
Barbara, I'd say never say never, because you never thought you'd be selling all these products, and now you are. So
Yeah.
knock on wood, let's see what happens.
Yeah.
Because you just opened, what has surprised you the most so far since launch?
Our first weekend was absolutely insane. We have a substantial size tasting room, not a huge parking lot, but over that, and we were only open on Saturday and Sunday. We had well over 600 people come and say hello, which was phenomenal. And then since then, things have slowed down to a more reasonable pace, maybe a little too slow right now, but given the holidays, it's completely understandable. We're still doing fine. But I think what really surprised us is that we've already had a lot of repeat business, which I guess I really wasn't expecting. I thought people would come, check it out, see what it's like, and kind of move on. But we've seen a number of people come back 3 weekends already, and we've only been open for 6. So I think that's really encouraging. People have been really welcoming, like I said, and even we're part of this. It's called a fermentation farm trail. There's 6 venues, and we're a little bit different in our business model in that all of the venues grow something that they put into their product. So there are 3 wineries, 2 breweries, a cidery. So, and all of them are growing something that they do put into their own product that they're making. We are going to be starting to grow some barley next spring, so we'll be able to use that for beer as well. Apple, we do have apple trees, but as again, cider is a wine product in the way the laws are in Virginia. We are covered with the amount of grapes that we grow, and having 5 apple trees, so we're good there. But I was really, it's a pretty small geological area. We can get to all 6 like within 20 minutes of each other, so we weren't sure how they were going to see that as competition, but they've been really welcoming and have been sending people our way. We're sending people their way. So every business owner has been really supportive of having a new venture, which I think is surprising, probably the biggest surprise that we've encountered. So,
well, that's fantastic to hear, and it's fantastic that you've had so many repeat customers. I mean, hearing that people have come on 3 out of 6 weekends so far, you must be doing right. And we'll dive into a little bit. I bet by offering so many different products, you become more of a one-stop shop for many families who are looking for all of the above. And we're going to talk about that soon. But Clay, I bet you can relate a little bit to, growing a lot in one spot.
Yeah. You're talking about growing on the farming
And
side?
you started as a blueberry farm, correct?
Oh, as the whole thing. Yeah. The business has been through many iterations. It started as a plant nursery, actually, and then went to blueberries in the mid 90s. My father was one of the first ones to do that in Florida. And then just with the extra blueberries laying around, he said, well, I bet you can make wine with this, and started doing that in his kitchen. So, and we still make those 3 3 to 5 blueberry wines a year, as well as all kinds of other stuff. Our bestseller in the wine side now is a sangria, and then we do a Pinot Noir with raspberry, blueberry, blackberry. We call it wild berry Pinot Noir, our second bestseller. So yeah, that's growing like crazy, and then has grown like crazy, and then we've seen a lot of growth recently in cider. I think it's just a lot. We don't have as much competition. A lot of the big guys got out of it and got into seltzer. Not a lot of competition locally, or even in the state of Florida. Friends of mine that are doing it, but they're more boutique-y. So yeah, we're seeing exponential growth in cider, which is great.
And what made you add beer into the mix?
It's a great question. We kind of became, so the story is Cigar City Brewing got into making cider about 10, 11 years ago. And, I got to know Joey and Joey Redner and all the guys at Cigar City. And I kind of got into the craft beer scene with them, and my winemaker did too. And as we were making the cider for them, they kind of helped us start making beer. I actually brewed the first beer I ever brewed in my life in 2011 at Cigar City on their original brew system. And I was kind of hooked from there. My dad was the wine guy. I was the beer guy. And I kind of pushed building the brewery. And ever since, so that was 10 years ago. And, we use the brewery as another way to kind of showcase Florida fruits, was what we do in all of our products. So
when you
and personally, I'm drinking beer if it's my choice.
I like it. When you launched a brewery, how big was your system?
7 barrels. We still have the same 7-barrel system out there. It's not long for this world. Chinese built electric 7-barrel system. I think we're going to have to make some changes soon. We got plans in the works, but not bad. 10 years, we're still using the same system, and we added fermenters and grew the brewery like a lot of people maybe did. And then we've kind of shrank it back down just because, so much competition and distribution. And we looked at, kind of 80-20, and we weren't making that much money in distribution with beer. We reeled that in and focused on tasting room and then very select distribution on the beer, which I think was a great move. That was maybe 4 years ago we made that choice.
And looking at pictures of your farm, it looks absolutely gorgeous. So I'm sure, having that beer offered on site just only adds to the experience and creates it more accessible to more guests.
Yeah. And we have seen beer demand, as relative sales to the other stuff we sell, wine and cider. We're seeing cider grow, wine's kind of static, but beer is growing really well over the last year or so, which is good stuff. I think, we made a brewer change. And since Kyle's been here, the beers have been flying out. So he's doing an amazing job.
And Clay, if you had to give rough numbers of what percentage of sales, like your cider, wine, beer take up, what would those numbers be?
For on-site, we're probably around 60% wine, and then I would say the cider and the beer kind of share the other 40%.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing that. Now,
Yeah,
Tamara,
absolutely.
You're not making wine, you're making mead. I'd love to learn a little bit more of that backstory of how you came to want to open a meadery in Georgia. Well, a lot of people might not at that time know much about mead. So how did that even transpire?
Well, I guess I'll do the short story. So I actually lived in Virginia.
No way, what part?
Near DC. I was up in the Max area. So yeah, when you guys are talking, I was like, oh yeah. Next time I go up there, my sister still lives up there. So I'll definitely come try and visit you guys. So my brother is actually the one that started the business. We started our licensing in 2015. It took us a full year to get completely licensed because obviously nobody knew what a meadery was in the state of Georgia. There was one other meadery, but they weren't a farm winery, which is what we were going for. That gives us, as you guys know, because you have farms, that gives us more capabilities of things that we can do, more tasting rooms and stuff like that. Some of which we had to give up actually when we opened the brewery because of the way that the laws were. But yeah, so they actually talked me into moving down to Georgia and starting the business up. So I moved down here in 2016, and we opened March of 2016. So our licenses, we were officially licensed in 2015. The Meadery started with my brother as a home brewer. He did not like beer, and he doesn't like sparkling anything. So he was at like a medieval reenactment type thing, and they had a bunch of mead at it, and he loved it and found out how easy it is to make, and started the journey there. We always say that it's really easy to throw honey, water, and yeast into a bucket, and it's the only naturally occurring thing that can happen. Out in nature, you can find mead on its own, but it's a very difficult thing to perfect, as you all know. Making wines and ciders and beers, anybody can throw it into a bucket, but getting it to a point where everybody wants them is a different story.
I can agree to that. As a home brewer, I dabbled in mead a little bit quite some time ago, and I still have a few of those original bottles in my pantry because I just don't really have the urge to grab them. So I'm sure you're doing a much better job.
Yeah, so so they moved me down here actually to work on their marketing. But now I'm the chief operating officer. I also run their production somewhat. I don't run it anymore, but I've come up with a couple of our award-winning flavors and stuff.
I like how you just threw in award-winning flavors. Small little brag there. Congrats.
Our best seller is a pear almond mead. It's called Bliss, and it's pretty funny because like I came up with it because I used to make this dessert called a pear frangipane tart. So it's pears and almonds and stuff, and we had some pears that we needed to do something with. So I was like, oh, let's throw this together, and it turns out like it's the #1 seller. It's the best mead in Georgia 5 years in a row. So wow. They've had me make more meads now than some of the other stuff.
Well, that's awesome. So you mentioned you're in a newer facility now. Did you expand because you wanted to add beer into the mix, or what was the transition like?
That was part of the reason. Yeah. I had wanted to do that for pretty much since the beginning, quite honestly, because up in Virginia, as you all know, there's a lot of wineries up there that have added beer for that reason, to keep people, on premises or stay longer, or you can invite a bigger group of people because there's more offerings and stuff like that. But our facility was 1,500 square feet front to back. That included the tap room, that included all of the production area. So there was no room to add anything else into it. Even here, we're already, the tap room, the way that the demising walls were already put in place here, the tap room is a little bit bigger than the production area. If I could move the tap room to be a little bit smaller, I would probably do that. But I'm not changing the demising wall. Yeah, that was the start of it. Yeah.
And Tamara, one other unique thing that differentiates you between Clay and Barbara is, you operate under two separate brand names. You have Mandatory Fun Beer Works for the beer side, and you have Alchemist Meadery for the mead side. Why did you all choose to go with two different brands?
That was kind of my push for it because I think they're two different things. They're two completely different things. So initially the brewery was supposed to be just in-house. But how do I explain this the easiest way? Meaderies have a very Renaissance-y and medieval fair type connotation with it. And it's our goal to kind of update that a little bit, to kind of make mead more of a household option. Our meads are actually, most of them are off dry. So they're not the overly sweet meads that you might have tried before. Our ciders are actually all still too. We don't make any sparkling ciders. So that's always a surprise when people try our ciders. As mentioned before, my brother hates sparkling. So if he ever has a vote, it's usually not a sparkling one. So I decided that we needed to brand the brewery differently. So that way, if people are just searching for a brewery, the Mandatory Fun Beer Works will pop up on its own, as opposed to Viking, Alchemist, Meadery, and Brewery, and Cidery, and whatever else the ands might be. So we do get people in that had just found the brewery, and then they're like, "Oh, look at all this other stuff you guys have." So
awesome. Well, thank you for sharing that. Now, not that your model has a lot of ands in it, Clay, but Keel Farms does a lot. For what reason, have you all seen success with keeping it under one family brand?
Yeah, that was kind of my change. Actually, we weren't always that way. I moved back from another brewery. I started up in Buffalo about 4 years ago and took the company over from my father. And we had two different brands. The winery brand is much larger and much more established. Keel and Curly Winery. Curly is my grandmother's maiden name, so it's all technically our family. And then the brewery was Two Henrys Brewing Company, which was the two guys that basically started Florida, Henry Plant and Henry Flagler. So there was kind of like a historical link there. But I wanted to kind of move the brand a little more to a family destination, and I thought the idea of calling the place Keel Farms once again, because that's what it was called, in 1982, it would do that. So pretty much what we did was we changed the location to Keel Farms. We changed the beer brand and the cider brands to Keel Farms, which is Keel Farms Agrarian Ales and Ciders. So that there is that link there, that Keel is in all the names. And there is still some confusion with why do you have Keel and Curly Winery and then you have Keel Farms, and then my grandmother wasn't super psyched that I took her name out of some of the branding, but I think it's worked out. So now it's kind of like Keel and Curly Winery at Keel Farms.
No, that makes sense. Now, Barbara, how about you? Why did you decide to keep it under? Is it the Everleigh? Am I saying it correctly?
Yeah, Everleigh. Mm-hmm. Because originally we were just an LLC with the Everleigh. That's what the farm was under. That's what we're growing. We were just going to do the vineyard, and then have the winery. And then when we added the cidery and the beer, we're like, well, it was too difficult with ABC laws to try to brand it. So now it's Everleigh Vineyards and Brewing Company, which kind of incorporates all three aspects of it. And again, it's our cider maker and our beer maker. Our third son is getting his distribution license. So he'll be Everleigh Distribution. But clarity, and to make the kids realize that it's ours, that it would just be easier to kind of keep it under one umbrella.
Okay, because I actually don't know. Your last name is Evers, so why Everleigh?
So Leigh, Leigh, is Gaelic for healer or open meadow. When we bought the farm, it did have an open field, two of them, which is where we ended up planting our grapes, and we'll plant our barley. And my husband's real job is as a physician. So we kind of had both.
nice.
And it sounds kind of pretty when it's all together. And on a side note, I have probably met no fewer than 5 people that have said they've named a daughter, a granddaughter, a niece with the name Everleigh spelt the same way, which I'm like, well, that's kind of interesting. I don't know how you shorten that, but okay. Yeah.
I feel like you have to lock them in now for like weddings in like 2040. You really just got to get them to sign some sort of contract.
Yeah. So our daughter's name is Jordan, and we bought a case of Jordan wine in her birth year a number of years ago, and it's still pretty good. I'm not sure our new wine will last that long for them to turn 21 and enjoy it, but it is kind of fun that they've come and bought it at their birth year. So it's kind of a neat little side note.
My brother's name is Josh, and I know there's a winery called Josh something or other. I think he's got tired of that joke, but probably a decade ago. But, it's fun to give him a bottle every now and then when you don't know what he wants.
Yeah, it works out well.
Now, Barbara, one thing you mentioned when you decided to open up, you wanted to open up and do multiple brands and multiple liquids because of the synergies. What are some of the synergies between the beverages that you've experienced or hope to experience?
So kind of like Tamara says, our wines are very dry. That's the type that my husband and I kind of prefer. So we have very little residual sugar in any of our wines. But we kind of found that new wine drinkers, shall we say, tend to prefer something a little sweeter. So having the cider, although it can be the one that we first made is pretty dry, and that kind of does give people that opportunity if they want something sweet to have that. So that's kind of a good play for us. Again, it is a wine product, so we can kind of incorporate that into flights of wine that we're doing. We can switch out, a Cab Franc if that's not what they're interested in and want something sweet. We can offer a cider instead. And then, the beer is just, they're very, there are a number of people that will not try wine, don't like wine, and want to drink a beer. And on a hot summer day, that's what they want. And then there's the reverse. There are people that are like, hey, there's no way am I going to drink a beer. So I think to be able to play off both of those wants is really helped us kind of been so welcoming.
Are you able to produce both beverages in the same facility?
Yes, but again, Virginia ABC is very exciting. So, so our cold storage has to be separated with a door. Our bonded space has to be clearly printed. So our cider and our beer are all on long lines. So we have to put a bonded space where the beer is being held to keep cold. It doesn't affect the coldness too much with the cider, but it has to be clearly demarked. The fermenting tanks that we're using if we're using it for cider one day, needs to be clearly marked that it's being used for cider. And then we can remove the velvet ropes, and now we can use the same tank to ferment our beer. So we have to have a separate office for our wine than we do for our beer.
You have to have a separate office.
Yeah. So, so that was kind of like, you've got to be kidding me. And then they were like, well, it just needs to be like a closet. I'm like, okay, fine. We have a closet. That's what we need. So that part of it has been somewhat frustrating. The other frustrating part of it is distribution. There is for wine, as I think Virginia wine distribution. So we can kind of, on a small scale, run wine through that if we want to send it out to restaurants or other people. And there's a small charge for that versus going through a distributor. There is no such thing in place for beer right now. I think there's something in the works, but who knows when that'll happen, which is why our one of our sons is going to get his distribution license. So we're not locked into a huge contract with a local distributor that cannot get out of and lose so much money doing that. And that is a very long-term goal. We are probably not going to be distributing for a number of years yet, but especially this year, but it's just something that takes a while to get into place, and then we'll be ready for it. So we'll kind of see how it happens.
Awesome. Well, thanks for sharing that. Now, Tamara, one thing you mentioned early on is you said that, including yourself, everyone on staff is a mead maker. Do you still have everyone involved in the mead making process, or, what synergies exist between your staff and production and just the overall, branding experience?
Yeah, we actually do. So it started with the year that we couldn't get licensed, or the year that we were working on all of our licensing. You can still give away alcohol for free. So what we would do is every Wednesday night we would be open to the public. And that's how we figured out our first brands that we were going to launch with. Is they would get a free flight, but they would have to fill out a survey saying what they liked about it, what they didn't like about it. So now we do staff contests. So Mead Day, which I'm sure you all celebrate every year, it's the first Saturday in August, just in case you didn't know. So every year we do a staff contest, and essentially we've done different things. So sometimes I'll say, here, everybody has to use this base, and then you can add fruits or whatever, however you want to do it. But everybody has to use the same base. So that way there's a starting field. And then that'll be the free flight for mead day. And same thing, it's a free flight, but you have to fill out a survey. So last year, the staff, there were we always have a comment section. So there were some very interesting comments, and they asked me if they could do have you guys ever watched the mean tweets that actors do? Okay. So they did some mean comments. They did a video of each of them and reading off some of the funny comments and stuff like that. But yeah, so in the winter, I forget what we usually get, like some silly goblet or something like that the winner gets, and post that up on social media. And that mead usually gets made again. I actually told all of the staff this year, they were all good. So I was like, if any of you want to remake it and make a bigger batch or play with it a little bit more, feel free. So we're actually doing a contest for all of the owners this year. We have 6 owners. So for our anniversary this year, we're doing a contest, and that'll be the free flight for our anniversary. But yeah, it's fun. The customers like it. They feel like they're involved in the process, and the staff gets to have fun with making it, and they get to see the process of how it's made a little bit better. It's easier for them to explain to customers how meat is made.
Oh, the education for both staff and guests, so important.
We actually stopped hiring bartenders because we need customer service reps. I need somebody that can explain to people what meat is. So our last posting for bartenders, actually our taproom manager called it a bard tender. So if you know what a bard is. Yeah. So, and then the description was customer service, all that kind of stuff. I'm not sure I understand. Sorry, Siri.
Siri doesn't know what it is.
Yeah. Exactly.
I was almost going to make a joke about you hiring people directly from Renaissance fairs who already know, but you kind of made it for me. Now, Tamara, is everyone on your team also a beer brewer, or what kind of separation do you have between production roles?
We have one beer brewer right now, and that has been an interesting process. So we're probably going to hire another one, just for continuity's sake and having backup and stuff like that. No, they are not all they're mead makers. It is a different process. Mead is like I said earlier, it's far simpler. You're not boiling anything. There's no mash. There's none of that. So it is in a lot of ways, it's a much simpler and more streamlined process than brewing beer. Less messy.
Do you share much equipment? Are you able to?
The tanks. Yeah, we'll share that.
Do you have to go through the process like Barbara does, where you have to put a rope around it and say it's, here for a cider today, beer tomorrow, and just differentiate?
Kind of. Yeah, we have to, when they come for the inspections. Yeah, it's definitely like that.
Oh, interesting.
No, it's the tanks and the stuff, they're separated. And if we're using one, vice versa, if one is being a beer tank or a mead tank, we typically denote that in some way. It's not quite as bad. And I was remembering one of the reasons we didn't open the brewery sooner was not just because of the space, but the laws here in Georgia didn't really allow for us to have both. There was a new law that passed, I want to say like 4 years ago. And it was almost, breweries here in Georgia couldn't actually sell their own products to their customers. Mm-hmm. They had to, Clay, you've probably been to Georgia. You're close enough.
I've heard about it. Yeah, definitely heard about the battles in Georgia.
Oh, it was awful. They would sell, if you came to the brewery, you would get, you would buy a tour pass and it would come with tickets, and then you would turn in your tickets after your tour and be able to get beer. But you couldn't take home anything or anything like that. So
crazy.
Yeah, it was insane.
Yeah, glad things are better now.
Yeah, it's a little better. It's funny because I can sell a keg of mead because it falls under the winery laws. But I think we can only sell, I think it's like 256 ounces of beer at a time. So
really?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
Very interesting. Thank you for sharing that.
Like, it's gotten better.
Good.
No, Clay, the farm's been there 40 years. I think you started selling wine in the early 2000s. You added beer about a decade ago. I love to hear some of the synergies within your business model, but also, some of the differences that you face between each brand and keeping them separate.
Yeah, I mean, I think everything that Tamara and Barbara are saying, I echo. We have to separate things and physically, geographically. We also, my wife actually runs our wine distribution, one of our wine distribution companies. So we kind of play that game too, and that's a separate building for that purpose. But yeah, no, we're mostly making wine here. And a little bit of cider. We're somewhere around 600,000 bottles of wine. So it's a lot. So seven or eight people are making wine or bottling wine pretty much every day. Then another couple people make, packaging cider. We're doing cider in cans, and the canning machine is running 3 days a week or so. And then in the brewery, small amount, 500 to 600 barrels a year. Really one guy doing all that work. Minus maybe the keg washing and whatnot. But yeah, certainly. I mean, I think where it really helps us to have all these smart people is when we're coming up with new flavors and new varieties. And I'll give you an example. We're a partner with the Florida State Fair, which is a big fair in Tampa. 50,000, 100,000 people go, maybe more. Big marketing opportunity for us. We kind of take over one of their bars and we make a special cider for them. And last year, I think it was... we've done cotton candy, we've done elephant ear, and that takes 30, 40 iterations of trying different combinations.
Cotton candy cider and an elephant ear cider.
Right. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So when you have a brewer and his background and adjuncts and different flavorings, and then you have the winemaker and his background and how to ferment things and what different grape profiles and yeasts and everything can do. I think that synergy is really valuable to us. And, we make a lot of sweet products. So we're a little more reliant on all kinds of different ingredients to get to the flavors, that we want, and a little less reliant maybe on the raw materials, the apple, the grapes, the raw materials on the brewing side. So I think, I think as far as synergies go, definitely that. And then we have a lot of brain power when it comes to educating our staff and setting up our bars and running our restaurant and all that. So we try to, it never all seems to come together perfectly and from every angle, but if you get most of them right, then we're creating a good customer experience, and that's what we're going for every day.
Yeah, let's dive in now more that education component you all have mentioned. Clay, you just touched on, having meetings where you bring people together. It's great probably to have your head cider maker and your head brewer just share ideas to craft the perfect cotton candy cider or whatever it may be. So I think having that brain trust is really important. And Tamara, you've mentioned it earlier about the importance of education. I'd love to hear what you're doing on your staff side to make sure your staff is knowledgeable about all your products. We're going to dive into guests in a little bit, but how do you make sure your team knows your story, knows about your products, and is able to, understand that before they even speak to the guest?
That's been an interesting process because we didn't actually have staff until just before COVID. We've had one or two here and there, but we ran everything up until then. So one of the things that we've realized over the past couple of years is they don't know the origins of how each of the things were made or like how they came about and that kind of stuff. So I've been having, I'll have staff meetings where I'll talk about a particular mead and we'll talk about how the first creation of it, where it came from, the origin of it, so that they can have a better experience when they're talking to the customers and stuff.
Will there be a quiz following that, lesson?
No, I don't do that. We did have to do that with the beer though, because most of the staff was hired prior to us opening the brewery, and they all loved mead and wines and ciders and stuff like that. But a lot of them don't particularly like beer. So that's been a really interesting process, getting them to understand what the different types of beers are. I'm pretty fortunate. My taproom manager used to work at a growler shop and loves beer. So he loves all the different styles and stuff like that and has done a lot of education with it. So recently I've been looking at the Cicerone program to see just like the entry level, having them go through that so they can understand it a little bit better. On the mead side, we haven't done it yet, but we're working on putting together a sensory tasting with different honeys and stuff like that so they can understand. It's a lot like grapes or barley and hops and stuff like that, where there's just a ton of different honeys out there and they produce different flavors in the end product. So if they can see where it starts from, they can understand a little bit better in the end. I do like them, if they can, to come help us bottle, because that also helps them understand like the entire process. And customers love hearing about all those little things. So the education portion is evolving for sure.
How do you overcome the staff member who's so passionate about mead, not weed? Eventually is
You guys are legal now. We're not here.
We've had coffee, we've had distilling, we've got wine, mead. We might as well have that one next. So
mead is a thing.
So going back to mead with the M there, how do you take the staff members who aren't very excited about beer and, get them at least able to properly explain it to a customer? You talk a little bit about it, but, when you don't enjoy a product, I imagine it's a little bit harder to sell it.
Yeah, for sure. So they definitely have their favorites. The stouts and porters, they tend to like a little bit better because they're on the sweeter side and they're a little bit more like mead. One of the other reasons we started the brewery is because in order to make a mead called a braggot, which is a mixture of mead and beer, we had to have a brewery license in order to do so. So once we kind of opened the doors of the options that they could mix beer with mead, that kind of gave them kind of carte blanche to be able to create a whole bunch of different flavors. So at that point, they started really getting on board with the idea of beer being good. The other part of it was, if it's not a beer that they like, so let's just take a Kolsch, for example. If they understand what a Kolsch is supposed to taste like, when they're talking to a customer about what they might like, they can recommend it based on, they understand what a Kolsch is supposed to taste like. So they can say, oh, that sounds like those flavors. We have a thing that does that. Do you want to try it? And I've always told them, you can always give people, we have little 2-ounce taster cups, like, go ahead and give them a taste of something. Like, I would much rather have a customer try a couple of things before they commit to a pint or a flight or something like that, and have them be upset about their purchase than not. So
yeah, it's all about helping the customer find what's right for them. Now,
Exactly.
Clay, at your business, how do you make sure your team is properly educated on everything that you're offering?
It's kind of a propaganda machine. I mean, it should only because of our size, and we have a sales team, we have a activation marketing team out on the streets. We have about 75 people working in the restaurant and tasting room. So internal communication is actually quite a bit of a challenge. I do a newsletter every month that goes out to everybody and gets posted, that talks about what's coming and what's in it. New flavor sheets, kind of like a product sheet, goes out for any new products. Monthly training in the tasting room. They close down and do training there. They do meetings all week, shift meetings every day, big one on Fridays. So yeah, I mean, we kind of discovered, and I tell my leaders this, that you have to say, talk and train and teach way more than you think you do. You think you said it, you didn't say it. You got to keep doing it and keep doing it and keep doing it. So, we've put in place a lot of systems that help with that. We use 7 shifts for, scheduling our staff in the tasting room. You can also use that to get messages out to everybody. There's tools like that help a lot. We've done some online training, where we've recorded it and put it out there and tracked who took it and who didn't, and, maybe with mixed results. But as much as you can get everybody working through in different parts of the organization, that really seems to help as well, because they kind of talk, throughout the day, throughout their shifts. If they work in the brewery for a couple of days, or then they're a tour guide, and the tour guides talk to the bartenders and the brewers up there, and the production guys go up, and I buy them a few beers. They do that. We do that every Friday. They're hanging out in the tasting room, talking to the bartenders. So it's a little bit of all of that, and try to just have everybody curious and passionate about the products.
And that's an ongoing challenge, isn't it?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. Well, Barbara, how about you? What is the strategies, one that you kind of thought you were going to try prior to launching and now put into impact, since you've launched just a few weeks ago?
So we're, a little bit different. We only have 4 different types of wine right now, so it's pretty easy. We did have a tasting with our bartenders. We're a pretty tight group, so most of it is family. We have a few that are paid staff, not that I don't pay in the family, but that are outside of the family. So we had a training session. We had a tasting session with them. My husband is pretty passionate about it. So they got tasting notes. And we're, either myself or my husband are always there. So if they have a question, we can answer it. We haven't made ourselves very knowledgeable on the beer yet because it's not ours. So we have a general idea, like someone says, which I don't know how many of this has happened to you. I want something that tastes like a Bud Light. Okay, you're in a craft brewery. It's going to be a little challenging to get that, but so you're looking for something light. So we kind of point them in one direction, and we do the same thing that you all do. We let them taste something before they commit to something, and we haven't had too many problems with that. I don't know how we're going to handle it, to be perfectly honest. Once we have all of ours up and running, I think just by the nature of the beast, how slowly some of these things get into the tasting room, by that time we'll have a better idea of the taste profile, the yeast that we've used, where we've sourced the material, which is pretty important to us. We kind of like to give our customers an idea of where the stuff is coming from. We're trying to use as much local product as possible. So we'll see. Yeah, it'll be
talking to all three of you today, is it fair to assume that someone can buy all of your products at the same bar when visiting your tasting room?
Yes.
Yes. Clay, how about you?
Okay, can you say that one more time? I'm sorry.
Are people able to purchase a wine, cider, or beer at the same location? There's different parts of your tasting room that they have to visit.
Yeah, we do kind of have a beer and cider bar, that's a little more like you might see at a craft brewery, a little more casual, a little more laid back. And then on the other side is the sort of more formal, granite counter. All of our wines are behind it with the medals hanging on them, like you see at every winery, I guess. That's the tasting bar, right? So if you want that intimate sit down or stand there, I don't let people sit, but the stand there and have a formal tasting where the person talks you through each product. We have that on the left, and then on the right is a little more the craft beer bar. But we do mixed flights. So, you can get a flight that is some cider, some beer, some wine, some cider, and mix it up. And I think people really like that flexibility.
That is really neat. So Clay, do you see much overlap between the customers who are purchasing each beverage, or is it more so a way just to keep people's attention longer by bringing the whole family in?
It's a great question. And one of the things that I thought I was hoping would come up is sort of the demographic challenges we have, because we're the biggest in wine. The next biggest product is cider, and both very different demographic than the craft beer person, right? I can tell you we're mostly 25 to 55 women. That's who's following the Keel and Curly Winery brand. Sometimes it's challenging to separate that and seem cool to like a craft beer guy, right? No matter how good the beer is and how good of a job we're doing. And that's a challenge. But I think to answer your question, it is mixed. When a group comes in, you tend to kind of have the folks that are going right to the beer, or right to the cider, right to the wine. But I am seeing a lot of younger men, under 25, that are really moving over to the cider side, because they went straight from drinking flavored Red Bull or whatever energy drink with whatever lifesaver was in it, straight into drinking White Claw, right? And they never had a Miller Lite or whatever. They're going to go to a cider, or they're going to go to a mead. I think quicker than they're going to go over to an IPA. So that's been a big shift that I've seen in the last few years, which is
that's a really interesting observation, Clay. So, looking at what you've created with Keel Farms and the demographics that come there, there's so many different kinds of beer out there. You could go chasing the haziest of hazy beers, but it sounds like someone's coming to your place for an overall experience.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, we are providing that farm experience and most of our customers are, unfortunately, Tampa Bay area and most of Florida where people live is big box stores. My house looks just like the person's next to me. And every day that's what they live in. Right. So even though we're only 25 miles from the coast, we're a whole different experience compared to that. We have animals, and we have a big pond with a gator swimming around in it. We have chickens running around, and we have, there's trees around, and you can see the plants in the ground. And, that's a very different experience than pretty much every other craft brewery or cider manufacturer in this area. So we're definitely giving that experience. And that's why we make sure that the wine, beer, cider, and the food offerings kind of fit that brand throughout the whole list of options.
Very cool. I haven't been to Florida in a long time, but it sounds like I need to visit.
Yes, sir. Please.
Now, Tamara, on to you. Mead and beer. What overlap do you see between the customers, having one and both, or one or the other?
Quite honestly, when we first opened as just the Meadery, we got a lot of craft beer people coming in. We found that people that were really into craft beer were more adventurous. They wanted to try the new thing first. So being really the only Meadery that had a tasting room at the time, we actually listed us as, like, in Yelp and all that. The hashtags we used was all brewery. I didn't use Meadery or winery for anything, because I wanted, not a lot of people are gonna be looking for a Meadery. More people are gonna be looking for craft beer and craft cider, that kind of stuff. So yeah, we actually got a lot of craft beer guys coming in. So opening the brewery was kind of nice because of that.
Have you turned on a lot of craft beer drinkers to mead?
I would like to think yes.
That's what I wanted to hear. No, Barbara, how about on your end? You opened offering both. Do you find that, as you alluded to earlier, people are just coming for that overall experience, so it's just a perk to have them in one spot? Or do you see much overlap even just thus far in people who are drinking your wine and wanting to have beer, or vice versa?
I think a lot of people are drawn to us because we do offer a wide variety of different things. The biggest, and I don't know if you've noticed this or not, but there's a lot of young families with, like, little kids that are showing up at these places, whereas I'm older than all of you. That was just never a thing when my kids were little. So it is surprising to me the number of people under 2 feet that are running around. So we're pretty cognizant of that. So what we chose to do is, our outdoor space and our first floor is family friendly, go have fun. But we do have a second floor that is strictly no one under the age of 18 is allowed up there, to kind of separate, because there are a lot of people that want to go out for a date and they don't want to have the kids screaming and the dogs running around. So we've kind of separated that, and that has, I wasn't sure what kind of pushback we were going to get for that, but people actually seem to appreciate the fact that they can have an adult conversation and not have to worry about some little one running around or falling on them. So, we opened at a weird time of year, so it hasn't, I don't think we've really fully appreciate what we've done yet. The first couple weekends were nice, but then the weather kind of turned cold, and Thanksgiving and now the holidays, and we have a much larger outdoor space than we do an indoor space. So we're just going to see where this leads us. And plan B is always an option for us. So we'll see how it all turns out.
Very cool insight there. Now, I've got one question before we start to wind down. Now, wineries, they often do a great job with wine clubs and similar memberships. I'd love to hear what you all are doing to build loyalty, and also how this is translating to the overall business model. And Clay, I'd love to learn a little bit more about what Keel is doing in that respect.
Yeah, great question. I think we could do better, to be honest. I think there's a lot of opportunity there for us. Because if you compare us, I don't know if you guys know about the brand Cooper's Hawk. You guys have those in your area,
Yep.
Atlanta? Okay,
Yep.
Everybody. So they do a tremendous job on their loyalty program, where they hook people into their wine club, and then that gets them to come back, and they get their wine. And in my humble opinion, you can get probably better wine for the same price at other retailers. But they do such a great job roping people into that club. So we do have a wine club, but it's, probably in the low hundreds when it could be, much bigger. But we do local discounts for people that live within a short drive. We do, we do like a rewards program through our POS that keeps people coming back. So we do a number of little things like that. There's some GWiz, marketing and digital advertising stuff that people way smarter than me help us with, that I think you could kind of consider a loyalty program. And yeah, a lot of our customers are buying our stuff at grocery. So, that's what I'm really trying to grow is getting every time they go to the grocery store, they're buying it, and that's one of our key challenges right now that we're working on. And quite frankly, it's kind of challenging when you're up against Stella Rosa and Dolce and Barefoot and those guys that are all $1 or $2 cheaper at the grocery store. So those are some of our challenges probably on the rebuy front.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that. Now, Tamara and Barbara, what are you two doing on the loyalty front? Are there any membership programs that you all have in place or goals to launch something?
Tamara, you go first.
Okay. We have 2 different clubs right now. We have a quarterly shipment club called the Alchemist Club. So they get 3 curated picks. It's usually a signature, a seasonal, and then a barrel aged in some sort. So actually, I'm working on it right now. Our quarterly for this quarter is a little late because we did advent calendars this year, which
cool.
is amazing, but it's also a huge pain if you can imagine.
Yeah, I can imagine. The packing.
Yeah, they're beautiful. I love it. It's great, but yeah, putting it together is awful. And then we have an in-house club that we call the Horn Club, and it's actually a drinking horn that they keep on the wall. Yeah, I mean, why not play into it, right? So they're all on the wall when you first walk in, so people see it immediately. So there's usually questions as to how do I get my name up on the wall kind of thing. There's a whole oath that they have to say when they join the club. It's a whole thing.
That's awesome.
Yeah. No, we really play it up. So that has a limit.
You have the oath memorized?
I don't anymore, actually.
On the spot.
I was really hoping to put you on the spot on that one. I apologize.
It's a play off of the Rifleman's Creed. So if you know what that is, then
Very
it's
cool.
a play off of that. So I think our limit, we're actually just revamping it right now. We haven't raised the price on it in 6 years. So this year we're raising the price on it. And we're getting some software in place to better manage it. So I think we have 250 is the limit on that one. And then the Alchemist Club, like Clay was saying, the other club, I think we could do a lot better on. It kind of like, we do a push like every quarter of, marketing and stuff like that. And we'll get a bunch of people that join, but then we also get a bunch of people that are like, oh, I forgot. I don't want to do it anymore. I have a back stock of all of these meads I haven't tried yet. So we kind of just stay at the same level instead of increasing it. So that's definitely our focus for the next year is the 2 clubs is growing them both and growing. Well, we don't need to grow the Horn Club, but that one, maintaining it. And then we just switched to a new POS system last year. So we kind of lost a bunch of the loyalty stuff that we were doing with our old one. So we're going to start a new loyalty program that will hopefully get people to come back and use their points kind of thing.
Awesome. We're excited to learn more about that, as you keep testing things out. Now, Barbara, you're up, recently launched. What are you doing for loyalty thus far and what's in the works?
Nothing. So, we're small. Our vineyard is only 4.5 acres right now. And we do have the capability of planting more, but even that would be a 3-year turnaround time before we have enough grapes or the quality of the grapes would be good enough for us to use in wine. Last year, we pulled off, for the last 2 years, we pulled off 22 tons of grapes, which sounds like a lot, but it only equates to a little over 14,000 bottles. And Clay, that's nothing compared to where you are. So our biggest, people have asked if we're going to do a wine club, but I think we kind of need to see how popular the tasting room is going to be. We're trying to get most of the people in through the tasting room. I would just feel terrible if people came in and I'm like, oh, sorry, we have to give it to our wine club. So until we have a better grasp of what our population density is going to be and what our big sellers are going to be, we're just going to kind of hold off on that. And I don't know, and maybe you do, Andrew, is I don't know what the legality of having a loyalty program. Can I just, buy 2, get 1 free? I don't know if we can.
I'm by no means an expert on loyalty programs. I love them more than anything, but you definitely need to consult to see what you can do in each state. And that comes down to what you can call it, what you can offer. There's a lot of definitely state-specific guidelines worth researching.
Exactly. So until, we've just put all of our energy just to getting the doors open. So we're just too new to even contemplate where we want to take this. So here, and I'll
Well, once again, excited to follow where you do take it. Now, I've got one final question. We're going to do this one in rapid fire mode. And Clay, because you started off the introduction, you get to go first. And your question is, for anyone who owns a brewery or winery is looking to add the other to their operation, what's the one piece of advice you would give them right now?
Great question. I think my piece of advice would be you have to be all in, and you have to make the product and to the quality level and sell it as if that was the only thing you were doing. And if you can't do that, then please don't do
it. That's great advice. Please don't do it. Barbara, how about you? What's that one piece of advice that you would offer thus far?
I think people really need to understand the legalities of getting these different licensings and how they are going to affect what your space is. Originally when we were just going to do the vineyard and we are going to do a small little wine, little cute tasting room. Once we started researching barrel systems, and we only have a 7-barrel system, so it's not a gigantic piece, but the clearance for that is 13 feet. So you can't have a big production area of 13 feet head height and then just put a cute little tasting room on top of that. I mean, the scale of what you're about to do changes dramatically, and unless you're going to have multiple different buildings, that is definitely something that's going to add to cost for production, for heating, for spaces, for keeping things cold. I think you really kind of need to look at all of that aspect before you kind of go all in and say, yep, that's what we're going to do, if you're going to do it all in-house.
Great insight there, Barbara. And last but not least, Tamara, what piece of advice do you offer to everyone listening in?
I honestly echo what Clay and Barbara said. We actually, our brew system is only a 2-barrel system. So it's very small. We originally were just never, it was only going to be in-house. And of course that never works out. So Barbara, be careful what you say. Yeah. We were planning on doing exactly what you said about we're not going to distribute. We had a the distributor coming to us that first year. They were looking for meads and they were looking for something unique. So you never know what could happen. Oh. And honestly, our distribution is what saved us through COVID.
Yes.
So that was instrumental in keeping us alive through all of the lockdowns and everything here, especially with the new facility and not being able to open a tap room. But yeah, I would say all in, in a stellar product. Don't be afraid to pull it if it doesn't taste good.
Yeah,
listen to your staff, listen to your customers. We had some beers that had some off flavors to them, and so we pulled them. So it's just, we can't because we started them at different times. Our Meadery has an excellent reputation. I'm not going to lie about that. I'm very proud of it. So
all of your award-winning meads, Tamara, great work.
I should have put those behind me, right, Clay?
As you wear your horn hat.
Yeah, with my helmet. But so when the beers were coming out, they had to be the same standard. So they have to be impeccable. And don't be afraid to pull it. Don't be afraid to listen to what people are saying, what they need to see on your taps. I mean, just because you like IPAs that are super hazy and super, bitter and stuff like that doesn't mean that's what your customer wants. So that's what I would say.
That's fantastic insight. And we by no means can cover all the unique aspects of operating a winery, brewery, meadery all in one conversation. But you three have offered fantastic advice. Hope everybody has a little takeaway that they can put into their lives to see more success. So Clay, Barbara, and Tamara, thanks again for joining us today on this fun conversation. I hope to try all of your unique beverages at some point in the future. So cheers, everybody. Thanks again.
Cheers. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.